The Orion Deep Relay Station was not an impressive place. It floated alone in the dark space between two quiet star systems, far from the bright trade lanes where the great ships of the galaxy moved like glowing rivers of light. Compared to the massive orbital cities of the inner worlds, Orion Relay was little more than a metal skeleton with engines attached. Most travelers never noticed it. Most civilizations barely remembered it existed. But for the small crew living inside its narrow corridors, the station was home. Dr. Lena Ortiz had been stationed there for almost 4 years. 4 long years of routine scans, signal calibrations, and endless cups of recycled coffee from a machine that had been malfunctioning since before she arrived. She stood in the observation room staring through the wide viewport at the silent stars. Beyond the glass stretched an ocean of darkness filled with distant lights that never moved and never changed. It was beautiful. It was also incredibly boring. Behind her, the coffee machine gave a weak mechanical cough. "Don't you dare," Lena muttered. The machine beeped stubbornly, then spit out something that technically qualified as coffee. Her coworker Tariq Iqbal walked in just as she took the first sip. He watched her expression carefully. "Well?" he asked. Lena stared at the cup for a moment. Then she sighed. "It's worse today." Tariq grinned. "That's impressive. I didn't think that was possible." The relay station's job was simple. Its massive antenna arrays listened to the constant stream of signals traveling through the region: navigation beacons, merchant broadcasts, automated survey probes, and occasional diplomatic messages moving between distant civilizations. Most of the time the signals were routine, boring, predictable. But every now and then something unusual appeared in the noise. That was why Lena worked here. She specialized in signal interpretation, the complex science of separating meaningful transmissions from the endless static of space. Unfortunately, unusual signals were rare. Most days she simply monitored the data and waited. Today seemed no different. She placed the cup beside her console and sat down. Rows of monitors displayed a steady flow of numbers and waveforms as the station sensors scanned the surrounding region. Tariq leaned against the wall. "Anything interesting?" Lena shook her head. "Same as always. Trade chatter. Survey pings. Navigation updates. Nothing unexpected. Nothing mysterious. Nothing that would break the monotony of another quiet shift on the edge of nowhere." She stretched and adjusted the filters on one of the incoming signal streams. For a moment the waveform flickered. Then it stabilized again. Lena frowned. "That's strange." Tariq looked over. "What?" She leaned closer to the screen. A faint signal had appeared inside the background noise. It was weak. Extremely weak. Almost lost in the static. "Probably interference," Tariq said. "Maybe," Lena replied slowly. But something about the pattern bothered her. It didn't behave like random noise. The waveform repeated in a strangely precise rhythm. Short burst, fuzz, long burst, fuzz. Then the sequence started again. Lena began typing commands rapidly. The station's computers isolated the signal and amplified it. The pattern became clearer. Tariq's casual smile faded. "Is that repeating?" Lena nodded. "Yeah." She ran another analysis. The system translated the signal into a visible sequence. Thus, lines. Repeating structures. Her heartbeat sped up slightly. "This isn't interference." Tariq stepped closer to the screen. "What is it?" Lena stared at the pattern for several seconds. Then she whispered something that immediately changed the atmosphere of the room. "It's a message." The words hung in the air. A message meant intention. A message meant intelligence. Tariq crossed his arms. "From who?" Lena ran the next analysis. The computer tried to identify the signal using every known communication standard in the Galactic database. One by one the systems returned the same result. Unknown origin. Unknown format. Unknown language. Lena leaned back slowly. "That's the problem." Tariq frowned. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the screen. "This signal isn't using any communication protocol registered in the Concord archives." Silence filled the room. Out here, far from the central worlds, unregistered signals were extremely rare. Because almost every advanced civilization used the same communication standards established by the Galactic Concord thousands of years earlier. Anything outside that system usually meant one of two things: a very old signal, or something completely new. The station's computer chimed softly. Another analysis had finished. Lena stared at the results. Her pulse quickened. "Okay," she said quietly. "Now that's definitely strange." Thari leaned closer. "What?" Lena pointed to the timestamp calculations. The signal had traveled an incredible distance before reaching the relay station. And based on its strength and direction, it was coming from somewhere no one expected. The computer displayed the coordinates. A region of space labeled in every navigation database with the same warning. Voidscar Sector, the most dangerous region of space within 5,000 light-years. Ships that entered the Voidscar rarely came back. Thari looked uneasy. "So, someone is broadcasting from inside the Voidscar?" Lena nodded slowly. "Not someone." She zoomed in on the decoded pattern. The message repeated again, and again, and again, over and over without stopping. She swallowed. "It's a distress signal." For a few seconds after Lena spoke, neither of them moved. The word distress carried weight in deep space. Distress meant danger. Distress meant lives were at risk. And distress signals coming from the Voidscar sector were almost unheard of. Thari slowly pulled a chair beside Lena's console. "Are you sure?" he asked. Lena was already working. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she fed the signal through every decoding program the relay station had. "Not completely," she admitted. "But the structure is too deliberate to be random." On the main screen the waveform continued repeating. Short pulse. Short pulse. Long pulse. Fuzz. Then the sequence started again. Over and over. Like a heartbeat. Or a cry for help that refused to die. The station's AI chimed softly. Pattern recognition initiated. Rows of numbers appeared as the system analyzed the signal. Thari leaned forward. "Maybe it's a damaged navigation beacon," he suggested. "Some old probe drifting around the Voidscar." Lena shook her head. "No beacon transmits like this." She highlighted the repeating structure. "It's not just a signal." She zoomed in further. "It's language." The room fell quiet again. Thari stared at the screen. "You're saying someone built this message intentionally?" "Yes. But who would be crazy enough to operate inside the Voidscar? That was the real question. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Voidscar. The region had been discovered almost 1,000 years earlier when a Concord exploration fleet vanished while mapping that part of the spiral arm. Later surveys revealed why. The sector was filled with unstable gravitational distortions, collapsed stars, radiation storms, subspace turbulence strong enough to rip ships out of faster-than-light travel. Even automated probes rarely survived the journey. It was the kind of place every navigation computer labeled with the same instruction: "Do not enter." And yet someone inside that deadly region was broadcasting a message. Not once, not twice, but continuously. For who knew how long? The decoding software finished its first translation attempt. The result appeared on the screen as a messy block of symbols. Lena frowned. Still incomplete. The signal was too weak, too damaged. Years of traveling through the chaotic environment of the Voidscar had corrupted parts of the transmission. But enough remained to show one thing clearly. The message repeated the same phrase again and again. Thari leaned closer. "Can we clean it up?" "Working on it." Lena adjusted the filters. The station's enormous antenna array slowly shifted position outside the hull, aligning perfectly with the signal's origin point. Static faded. The waveform sharpened. Then the translation system tried again. This time the output looked different. 3 words appeared on the screen. Not perfect, but readable. Thari blinked. "Wait." Lena whispered the translation slowly. "Civilization, danger." Her heart started beating faster. They ran another pass through the signal. More fragments appeared. Planetary systems failing. Population at risk. Requesting all assistance. The message loop restarted. Over and over. Always the same. A civilization asking for help. From inside the most dangerous region of space known to the galaxy. Thari leaned back in his chair. That's impossible. Lena didn't answer. Instead she began scanning the signal more deeply. There was something else hidden inside the transmission. Something even stranger. The signal wasn't just broadcasting a distress message. It was also transmitting enormous amounts of data. Sensor logs. Environmental readings. Star charts. Thousands of compressed files embedded inside the transmission bursts. Lena opened the first one. The display filled with images. Alien architecture. Towering cities built along the edge of a massive ocean. Ships floating above the atmosphere of a blue-green world. An entire civilization. And then the images changed. Cities burning. Energy storms tearing across continents. Space stations collapsing into clouds of debris. Thari felt a chill crawl down his spine. Those are disaster reports. Lena nodded slowly. Yeah. She opened another file. This one contained population estimates. Her breath caught in her throat. Oh my God. What? She turned the screen toward him. A single number dominated the display. 6,104,000,000. Thari stared. That's 6 billion people, Lena said quietly. The distress signal wasn't from a small outpost. It wasn't a damaged probe. It was coming from an entire planetary civilization. And according to the data, that civilization was dying. The station's alarm chimed again. Another analysis had completed. Lena opened the report. Her eyes widened. Okay. Now what? Thari asked. She pointed to the origin coordinates. The signal wasn't just coming from somewhere inside the Voidscar. It was coming from the very center of it. A region no ship had ever successfully navigated. A region so unstable that even Concord exploration fleets avoided it entirely. Thari rubbed his forehead. So, 6 billion aliens are asking for help. Yeah. From the middle of the most dangerous part of space in the galaxy. Yeah. And somehow their message reached us. Lena nodded. That's the part one can't explain. They both stared at the screen for a long moment. Finally Thari spoke. So what do we do? Lena knew the answer immediately. Relay stations didn't make decisions like this. They passed information to the people who could. She opened a secure channel. The signal connected instantly to the nearest Concord communication hub. Her message was short. Urgent. Unidentified distress signal detected. Origin, Voidscar Sector. Estimated population in danger, 6 billion. She hesitated for just a moment before sending the final line. Immediate assistance required. The transmission vanished into the deep network of galactic communications. Within minutes, it would reach the Galactic Concord Council. And when it did, the entire galaxy would learn about the dying civilization inside the Voidscar. The message from Orion Deep Relay Station reached the Galactic Concord in less than 4 minutes. That alone made it unusual. Most transmissions arriving at the Concord Council were diplomatic requests, trade negotiations, or bureaucratic updates from the thousands of member civilizations scattered across the galaxy. Distress calls were rare. Distress calls from inside the Voidscar sector were almost unheard of. By the time Lena Ortiz finished her shift, the signal she had discovered was already being studied by some of the most powerful minds in known space. The Grand Convocation Chamber on Orionis Prime was enormous. It floated at the center of a massive ring-shaped station, suspended between two brilliant stars that illuminated its transparent outer walls. From space, the structure resembled a glowing crown. Inside, more than 400 alien civilizations had representation. Some delegates sat in floating platforms surrounded by holographic displays. Others existed as energy projections or mechanical avatars connected to distant home worlds. A few species communicated through patterns of light or shifting chemical clouds. But no matter their form, every civilization gathered in the chamber served the same purpose: maintaining order across the galaxy. For 10,000 years, the Concord had kept peace between species that might otherwise have destroyed each other. It regulated trade routes. settled territorial disputes, and responded to threats that endangered multiple civilizations. Now a new threat had appeared, one no one expected. The signal from the Voidscar appeared in the center of the chamber as a massive holographic projection. Waveforms rotated slowly above the assembly floor. Streams of decoded data scrolled beside them. The Volari delegates studied the information carefully. Their crystalline body refracted the holographic light into shimmering patterns across the chamber walls. This transmission has been verified as authentic, the Volari representative announced. A murmur spread across the platforms. Origin coordinates confirmed the signal was broadcast from within the central Voidscar region. Another ripple of surprise moved through the delegates. Even the oldest civilizations rarely entered the Voidscar. The environment inside the sector made navigation almost impossible. Gravitational fractures distorted faster than light travel. Radiation storms could strip shielding from even the strongest ships. And strange energy anomalies interfered with sensors and communications. It was the closest thing the galaxy had to a natural death trap. Which raised an obvious question. Why was a distress signal coming from inside it? The data files extracted from the transmission began appearing above the chamber. Images filled the air. Alien cities built along enormous coastlines. Orbital stations circling a massive blue planet. Elegant starships rising from gleaming launch towers. An advanced civilization. One that had clearly existed for centuries. The Volari delegate continued. The species responsible for this transmission has been identified as the Thari Collective. Several delegates reacted immediately. The name was familiar. The Thari were not a new civilization. They had been discovered nearly 200 years earlier during a deep exploration survey near the Voidscar's outer boundary. At that time they had declined membership in the Concord. Their leaders had chosen isolation, preferring to remain within their own territory rather than join the galactic political structure. The Concord had respected their decision. But no one had realized the Thari civilization extended so deep into the Voidscar itself. The holographic images shifted again. Now the cities were burning. Massive storms of glowing energy tore across entire continents. Orbital stations broke apart as their structural systems failed. Another set of data appeared beside the images. Environmental readings. Atmospheric collapse. Planetary magnetic instability. The Volari voice remained calm, but the implications were enormous. The Thari homeworld is undergoing catastrophic planetary failure. The chamber fell silent. A planetary collapse on that scale was rare. When it happened, entire civilizations could disappear in a matter of years. The Volari displayed the final statistic recovered from the distress transmission. The number floated above the chamber in glowing light. 6,104,000,000. A low wave of shock moved through the delegates. More than 6 billion lives. Entire species populations had vanished with fewer casualties than that. The Thari Collective has transmitted repeated requests for external assistance, the Volari continued. Without intervention, their civilization will likely cease to exist within 12 standard months. For a moment, no one spoke. 400 civilizations considered the same question. Could the Concord save them? The answer depended on one brutal reality. The Voidscar. To reach the Thari homeworld, any rescue fleet would need to navigate the most dangerous region of space known to the galaxy. Even if ships survived the journey, operating within the Voidscar for long periods would be nearly impossible. Navigation systems malfunctioned. Energy fields destabilized. Ships could vanish into gravitational fractures without warning. One miscalculation could destroy an entire fleet. Several delegates began exchanging quiet signals. Risk assessments. Logistical calculations. Projected costs. Finally, one of the larger platforms activated. A representative of the Thalar Dominion leaned forward. Their insectoid body gleamed under the chamber lights. The Thala had always been known for their ruthless efficiency. When they spoke, the chamber listened. The situation is unfortunate, the Thalar delegate said. But the Concord must consider the cost of intervention. A new hologram appeared beside the Thari distress signal. A simulation of the Voidscar environment. Distorted space-time currents. Radiation storms powerful enough to cripple warships. Unpredictable gravitational anomalies. The Thaler voice remained cold and precise. A rescue mission would require hundreds of ships. Casualty projections exceed 30%. Another calculation appeared. The economic cost of such an operation would exceed the combined resource production of several member civilizations. The delegate paused. Even if the mission succeeded. The chamber understood the meaning behind those words. Saving 6 billion lives would require risking tens of thousands more. Ships, crews, resources. All for a species that had never joined the Concord. The Volari representative turned toward the assembly. The Concord must now decide whether intervention is justified. The fate of the Thari civilization hung in the balance. And across the galaxy, the debate was about to begin. The Grand Convocation Chamber fell into deep discussion. Across the enormous spiral platforms, representatives of hundreds of civilizations began transmitting calculations, projections, and arguments to one another through the Concord's shared data network. The Thari distress signal continued to rotate silently above the chamber. 6 billion lives. And only 12 months left before their world collapsed. For several minutes, the delegates simply watched the images. Cities burning. Atmospheric storms swallowing entire continents. Space stations drifting powerless above a dying planet. Finally, the first official response came from the Thaler Dominion. The insectoid delegate leaned forward, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic images of the disaster. The Dominion recognizes the tragedy unfolding in the Voidscar, the Thaler representative said. But emotional reaction must not override rational judgment. A new set of projections appeared above the chamber. Simulations of rescue fleets entering the Voidscar. Ship trajectories twisting unpredictably as gravitational fractures distorted their navigation systems. Energy storms tearing through shields. Entire vessels vanishing when faster-than-light drives misaligned with the unstable space-time currents. Navigation through the Voidscar carries a catastrophic failure probability, the Thaler continued. Losses could reach 40% of deployed vessels. A ripple of uneasy signals moved through several alien platforms. 40% losses meant tens of thousands of crew members dying before they even reached the Thari home world. The Thaler delegate continued calmly. The Thari Collective declined Concord membership 2 centuries ago. They chose independence from our political structure. The implication was obvious. They had refused help before. Why should the Concord risk everything now? Another platform activated. The speaker belonged to the Sarthi Trade Consortium, a species known for their focus on economics. The Sarthi representative was a tall, thin figure with 4 delicate arms and bright golden eyes. The cost analysis must also be considered, they said. Another projection appeared. Columns of numbers filled the air. The resource expenditure required to sustain a long-term rescue operation inside the Voidscar would destabilize trade across multiple sectors. Fuel reserves. Industrial capacity. Ship production. Every calculation pointed to the same conclusion. Saving the Thari would require enormous sacrifice. The Sarthi delegate finished their statement. The Concord must evaluate whether such an investment is justified. More voices joined the debate. A crystalline species from the outer spiral arm argued that rescue fleets might trigger larger gravitational disturbances inside the Voidscar. A mechanical civilization warned that their ships were not designed for extended operations in unstable space-time environments. Several younger species expressed sympathy for the Thari but admitted they lacked the resources to assist. The discussion lasted hours. Gradually the tone shifted. The delegates stopped asking how the Thari could be saved. Instead they began asking whether it was worth trying at all. Finally, the Volari representative raised a crystalline limb. The chamber fell silent. The Concord must render a decision. The Thari distress signal continued repeating in the air above them. Help us! Help us! Help us! The Volari's voice remained calm. Based on the projected risks and costs, the majority of member civilizations recommend non-intervention. A quiet murmur spread through the chamber. The decision was not unanimous. But it was overwhelming. Saving the Thari would require too much. Too many ships. Too many lives. Too many resources. The Concord had faced difficult decisions before. And the result was always the same. The stability of the galaxy came first. The Valari delivered the official verdict. The Galactic Concord will not authorize a rescue mission. The words echoed through the enormous hall. For the Thari civilization, the decision meant extinction. Their distress signal would continue broadcasting into the darkness. But no ships would come. No fleets would enter the Voidscar. No one would answer their call. The Valari concluded the statement with quiet finality. The Thari Collective will be remembered as a lost civilization. The holographic images above the chamber slowly faded. The disaster in the Voidscar was now considered inevitable. Several delegates began preparing to move on to the next item in the Council's agenda. But before the chamber could fully transition, a smaller platform near the edge of the assembly activated. The symbol displayed above it was unfamiliar to many of the older species. A blue sphere surrounded by white stars. The emblem of Earth. Humanity had only joined the Concord recently. Compared to the ancient civilizations surrounding them, humans were still newcomers to the galactic stage. Their delegate stood slowly. Ambassador Elena Marquez. Her voice was quiet, but the translation system carried it clearly through the chamber. I would like to ask a question. Hundreds of alien delegates turned toward the human platform. The Valari representative nodded politely. You may speak. Marquez looked up at the fading projection of the Thari disaster. 6 billion people are going to die. The chamber remained silent. She continued. And the Concord's official response is nothing? The Valari answered carefully. The Concord's responsibility is to maintain stability across the galaxy. Marquez met their gaze. What about compassion? Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Thaler representative responded first. Compassion cannot override mathematical reality. Marquez folded her hands calmly. Maybe not. She paused. But sometimes it should. For the first time since the debate began, the chamber felt something unfamiliar. Disagreement. And it was coming from the newest civilization in the Concord. Humanity. News of the Thari distress signal reached Earth less than an hour after the Concord Council ended its debate. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. Every news network. Every public data feed. Every communication channel across human space. The message spread with incredible speed. 6 billion lives in danger. The galaxy refuses to help. The reaction was immediate and divided. The United Earth Assembly convened an emergency session that same night. The chamber in Geneva filled quickly as representatives from Earth, Mars, Luna, and the outer colonies took their seats around the circular hall. Large screens displayed the images recovered from the Thari transmission. Cities collapsing under violent energy storms. Orbiting stations breaking apart. Planetary evacuation ships launching into skies filled with lightning. And beneath the images, the number that had shocked the Concord. 6,104,000,000. 6 billion people. Waiting for help that was not coming. Assembly Speaker Daniel Wu struck the table lightly with his gavel. The session will come to order. The room quieted slowly. Wu looked around the chamber. We have all reviewed the Concord's decision. He gestured toward the screens. The question before us is simple. He paused. Should humanity intervene? The debate began immediately. General Marcus Hale, commander of the United Earth Fleet, stood first. The Concord is correct about one thing, he said. The Voidscar is extremely dangerous. A holographic map appeared above the assembly. Swirling gravitational distortions filled the region. Radiation storms moved unpredictably through the sector. Collapsed stars created violent tidal forces capable of tearing ships apart. Our current fleet was not designed for sustained operations inside an environment like this. Hale looked around the room. A rescue attempt could result in catastrophic losses. He wasn't arguing against helping the Thari. He was simply stating the reality. Many in the room nodded quietly. Next came Dr. Sofia Alvarez, a planetary scientist from the Mars colony. Her voice carried frustration. 6 billion people are dying. She pointed toward the disaster footage. And the galaxy is willing to watch it happen because the math looks bad. She turned toward the general. Yes, the Voidscar is dangerous. But humanity has faced dangerous environments before. Europa, Titan. Every world humans had settled was once considered impossible. That's what we do, she said. We solve problems. Applause echoed through part of the chamber. But not everyone agreed. Representative Kenji Sato from the Pacific Coalition raised his hand. We also have a responsibility to our own people. He gestured toward the population figures displayed on another screen. Earth and the colonies are still expanding. We are not one of the ancient powers of the galaxy. We cannot afford to sacrifice thousands of lives on a mission that may fail. The room grew quieter again. It was a painful argument, but it was not wrong. Helping the Thari might cost humanity dearly. Then Ambassador Elena Marquez stood. The same ambassador who had spoken in the Concord chamber earlier that day. She waited until the room settled before speaking. I understand every argument made here tonight. Her voice was calm. The risk is real. The cost could be enormous. She gestured toward the images of the dying Thari cities. But so is the alternative. She paused. If we do nothing, 6 billion people die. Silence filled the chamber. Marquez continued. The Concord believes stability requires difficult choices. They believe logic must come before compassion. She looked slowly around the assembly. Maybe they're right. Another pause. But if we follow the same logic, then what makes humanity different from them? No one answered. Because everyone in the room understood the weight of that question. The debate continued for hours. Military analysts discussed fleet capabilities. Engineers examined potential navigation strategies through the Voidscar. Economists estimated the cost of a long-range rescue mission. Public opinion polls began appearing on the assembly screens. Across Earth and the colonies, billions of people were already discussing the decision. Some feared the risks. Others demanded action. But as the hours passed, one pattern became clear. More and more voices supported intervention. Not because it was safe. Not because it was logical. But because it was right. Finally, Speaker Wu stood again. The assembly will vote. The room grew silent. Each representative activated their voting console. One by one, the results appeared on the central display. Green for yes. Red for no. At first the numbers were close. Then the green indicators began spreading across the screen. And more. Until the final tally appeared. Yes, 71%. The decision had been made. Humanity would attempt the rescue. Wu looked around the chamber. The United Earth Assembly authorizes a humanitarian intervention mission to the Voidscar Sector. The words felt enormous. Humanity had just committed itself to the most dangerous rescue mission in modern galactic history. The speaker continued. Fleet Command will begin preparations immediately. General Hale stood again. This time his expression looked different. More determined. If we're doing this, we'll need every ship we can get. Marquez allowed herself a small smile. Across the galaxy, hundreds of alien civilizations had looked at the numbers and decided the mission wasn't worth the risk. Humanity had looked at the same numbers and reached a different conclusion. The message from the dying world continued repeating through the stars. Help us. Help us. Help us. And for the first time since the signal had been discovered, someone was finally coming. The decision reached the shipyards before the sun rose over Earth. Within hours, every major dockyard across human space received the same transmission from Fleet Command. Operation Lifeline has been authorized. All available vessels prepare for deployment. The message carried one final instruction. Volunteers only. The first response came from Luna Shipyard Alpha, orbiting the far side of the moon. The station was one of humanity's largest construction facilities, responsible for building cargo transports and deep space research vessels. When the announcement appeared across the shipyard network, work crews paused in the middle of their tasks. Technicians climbed down from scaffolding. Engineers gathered around control terminals. They all read the same words. A rescue mission into the Voidscar. A mission most alien civilizations had refused to attempt. The silence lasted only a moment. Then someone spoke over the shipyard's open channel. "I'm in." Another voice followed. "Same here." Within minutes the volunteer list began filling. Pilots, engineers, navigation specialists, medical teams, cargo crews, even civilian workers asked to join the fleet. The message spread quickly through the rest of human space. It was Titan, the asteroid belt. Everywhere the reaction was the same. People signed up. Fleet Command had expected a few hundred volunteers. Instead they received hundreds of thousands. Of course, only a small fraction could actually join the mission. The Voidscar was dangerous enough without sending an oversized fleet. General Marcus Hale stood in the central command room watching the numbers climb. "Looks like people made their decision," one officer said. Hale nodded slowly. "Yes." He turned toward the tactical display. "Now we have to build the fleet." The rescue mission required ships capable of surviving inside the Voidscar. That meant heavy shielding, redundant navigation systems, powerful sensor arrays. Human engineers began modifying every available vessel. Cargo transports were reinforced with additional hull plating. Mining ships received upgraded radiation shields. Exploration cruisers were fitted with advanced gravitational stabilizers. Every design was altered for one purpose: survival. Shipyards worked around the clock. Welding torches lit the darkness of space like sparks drifting from enormous fires. New ships were launched every day. Old vessels were stripped down and rebuilt with stronger systems. Civilian industries contributed materials and equipment. Factory networks across Earth and Mars shifted their production lines to support the mission. Within 3 weeks the rescue fleet had begun to take shape. At the center of the operation stood the flagship, HFY Horizon Dawn. The ship had originally been designed as a long-range exploration vessel. Now it had been converted into a mobile command platform. Sensor arrays stretched across its hull. Communication towers rose above the main structure like metallic forests. Its cargo bays carried medical equipment, emergency shelters, and thousands of cryogenic transport capsules designed to evacuate civilians from the Thari home world. Dr. Lena Ortiz stepped aboard the Horizon Dawn on the morning the fleet assembled. She hadn't expected to be part of the mission. But when Fleet Command began recruiting signal specialists, her name appeared on the list immediately. She had been the one who discovered the distress call. As she walked through the ship's main corridor, she passed dozens of crew members preparing for departure. Some were checking navigation consoles. Others loaded emergency supplies. The atmosphere felt tense, but determined. No one here expected the mission to be easy. They were here because someone had to try. The fleet gathered in orbit around Earth. From the surface, the ships looked like a scattered field of silver stars. Transport vessels, medical ships, escort cruisers, rescue carriers. In total, the fleet numbered 112 ships. Not a massive armada by galactic standards, but enough to attempt the mission. General Hale addressed the assembled crews through a live transmission. His image appeared on screens across every ship in the fleet. "You've all seen the projections. The Voidscar is unpredictable. Some of us may not return." The room remained silent. No one looked surprised. Hale continued, "But if we succeed, 6 billion people will live who otherwise wouldn't." He paused for a moment. "Every civilization in the Concord looked at the same numbers we did. They chose not to help." His voice grew firmer. "We chose differently." The fleet crews listened quietly. Hale delivered the final order. "Prepare for departure." Across orbit, the rescue ships activated their engines. Blue light spread through the darkness as thrusters ignited one by one. The fleet turned toward the distant edge of the star system. Beyond that boundary waited the Voidscar. A place where ships vanished. A place where physics itself behaved unpredictably. A place where 6 billion people were still waiting for help. The engines flared brighter, and humanity began the journey the rest of the galaxy had refused to take. The rescue fleet reached the edge of the Voidscar after 6 days of travel. From a distance, the region looked almost beautiful. A vast cloud of glowing particles stretched across the darkness like a scar carved into the fabric of space. Lightning-like streams of radiation flickered through the drifting dust fields, illuminating strange ripples in space-time that bent the light of distant stars. But the fleet's sensors told a different story. Gravitational distortions twisted through the sector like invisible storms. Massive radiation bursts erupted unpredictably from collapsed stars hidden inside the nebula. Even the background structure of space itself seemed unstable. Dr. Lena Ortiz studied the data from the Horizon Dawn sensor array. "This place is worse than the simulations predicted," she said quietly. Navigation Officer Arjun Patel nodded grimly. "FTL lanes are completely unusable here. Normally, ships moved through faster-than-light corridors mapped by the Concord centuries earlier. Those lanes acted like highways through stable regions of spacetime. But the Voidscar had none. Every path through the sector had to be calculated manually. And every calculation carried risk. General Hale's voice came over the fleet communication channel. "All ships maintain tight formation. Navigation will be coordinated from the Horizon Dawn." The fleet slowed as it approached the boundary of the sector. Ahead of them, space itself seemed to ripple like disturbed water. The first ships crossed the boundary a few minutes later. Immediately the sensor readings changed. Magnetic field spiked. Radiation levels climbed. And the stars beyond the nebula twisted into strange distorted shapes as gravitational currents bent the light passing through them. Inside the command deck, the tension was obvious. "Beginning course adjustments," Patel said. His fingers moved quickly across the console as the navigation computer processed thousands of calculations every second. The fleet advanced slowly. Very slowly. Inside the Voidscar, speed could be deadly. The first problem appeared 2 hours later. A violent radiation surge erupted from a collapsed star hidden deep within the nebula. Warning alarms lit up across the Horizon Dawn's bridge. "Radiation spike detected," a technician shouted. Patel looked up sharply. "Trajectory. Expanding wavefront approaching the fleet." Hale issued the order immediately. "All ships alter course 20 degrees starboard." Engines roared as the fleet shifted direction. But not every ship moved fast enough. One of the smaller transport vessels was caught at the edge of the radiation storm. The blast slammed into its shields like a hammer. Energy readings spiked dangerously. For several seconds the transport drifted helplessly in the glowing cloud. Then its shield stabilized. The ship survived. Barely. A nervous breath passed through the command deck. That had been the first hazard. And they had only traveled a few million kilometers. The deeper the fleet moved into the Voidscar, the stranger the environment became. Gravitational currents pushed ships sideways without warning. Sensor arrays flickered as exotic particles interfered with detection systems. More than once, the stars themselves seemed to disappear completely behind curtains of distorted space. Navigation grew more difficult with every passing hour. Patel's team worked constantly to adjust the fleet's course. Even a small miscalculation could send a ship drifting into a gravitational fracture powerful enough to tear it apart. But despite the dangers, the fleet continued moving forward. Because somewhere ahead of them, 6 billion lives were still waiting. On the third day inside the Voidscar, the fleet encountered something unexpected. A massive field of drifting wreckage. Broken ships. Hundreds of them. Lena stared at the sensor feed. "These aren't Thari vessels." Patel enlarged one of the images. The hull design looked ancient. The markings were unfamiliar. General Hale leaned closer. "Concord Exploration Fleet," he said quietly. Records from centuries earlier told the story. A long-lost expedition that had vanished while trying to map the sector. Their ships had never escaped the Voidscar. Until now, no one had known where they had ended up. The wreckage drifted silently through the darkness. A graveyard of metal and broken technology. A reminder of how dangerous this place truly was. Hale studied the debris field. Then he gave the order. Proceed with caution. No one argued. The fleet moved carefully between the shattered remains of the ancient vessels. Every crew member understood the message the wreckage carried. This mission could end the same way. But on the 5th day inside the Voidscar, something changed. The Horizon Dawn's sensors detected a signal. But unmistakable. The same repeating pattern Lena had discovered at the relay station. The Thari distress call. She leaned forward in her chair. We're close. The signal strength continued rising as the fleet advanced. Soon the source of the transmission appeared on the main screen. A distant blue-green planet surrounded by violent electrical storms. Orbital stations hung in space above it, many of them damaged or partially destroyed. But the cities on the surface were still visible. Still alive. Still fighting to survive. Patel exhaled slowly. That's them. 6 billion lives. Just beyond the chaos of the Voidscar. General Hale spoke quietly over the fleet channel. All ships prepare for rescue operations. After weeks of preparation and 5 dangerous days navigating the most unstable region of space in the galaxy, humanity had reached the dying world. But what they were about to discover would change everything. From orbit, the Thari home world looked like a planet fighting for its life. Massive lightning storms stretched across entire continents, flashing through thick clouds of ionized gas that wrapped the planet like a violent shroud. Vast energy fractures tore across the upper atmosphere, creating brilliant arcs of unstable plasma that danced along the horizon. Even from space, the planet felt unstable. Ships drifting in orbit reported constant fluctuations in gravity and magnetic fields. Something deep inside the world was breaking apart. But as the rescue fleet moved closer, the first surprise appeared. Dr. Lena Ortiz frowned at the sensor data scrolling across her console. That's strange. General Hale looked over. What did you find? Lena zoomed in on a series of readings from the planet's magnetic core. These energy surges shouldn't be possible. Why? Because the planet's core reactor grid is still active. The Thari civilization had used a network of enormous energy generators buried deep beneath their planet's crust. The system regulated geothermal pressure and stabilized the planet's magnetic field. Without it, the world would have collapsed decades earlier. But the readings Lena was seeing didn't match the expected failure pattern. Instead of shutting down slowly, the generators had been overloaded. Repeatedly. She turned toward the command deck. This doesn't look like a natural disaster. A quiet tension spread through the room. Then what is it? Patel asked. Lena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened one of the damaged data files transmitted with the distress signal. The file contained the final research logs from the Thari Planetary Engineering Council. The first few entries were routine. Energy fluctuations. Magnetic field instability. Attempts to stabilize the planet's geothermal systems. But the later entries looked different. The tone had changed. Urgent. Confused. And then, afraid. Lena read one line aloud. Reactor output rising without command authorization. Another line appeared. External signal detected within core control network. She felt a chill run down her spine. That's not possible. Hale leaned forward. What do you mean? The core control systems should be completely isolated. No external signal should be able to reach them. But the data logs said otherwise. Someone, or something, had accessed the Thari Planetary Control Network. And once inside, they had begun increasing the reactor output levels. Higher and higher, until the planet's magnetic systems began tearing themselves apart. The storms, the gravitational fractures, the energy surges. All of it traced back to one thing. The planetary reactors had been deliberately pushed beyond safe limits. Patel looked at the screen in disbelief. You're saying this was done on purpose? Lena nodded slowly. Yes. The realization settled over the command deck like a dark shadow. 6 billion lives were in danger. Not because of an accident, but because someone had sabotaged the entire planet. The fleet began scanning the surrounding system more carefully. Within minutes they discovered another anomaly. A satellite, hidden among the debris of a damaged orbital station. At first glance it looked like a piece of wreckage. But its energy signature was still active. A stealth monitoring device. Patel enlarged the image. Definitely artificial. Lena checked the transmission logs. The satellite had been broadcasting encrypted signals into deep space. Not a distress signal. A report. General Hale's expression hardened. Can we identify the manufacturer? The engineering team worked quickly. Several minutes passed before the result appeared. The identification code matched a design used by only one political power in the galaxy. The Galactic Concord Intelligence Directorate. The command deck went silent. That didn't make sense. The Concord had only learned about the Thari disaster a few days earlier. How could one of their satellites already be here? The satellite had been here long before the distress signal. Lena opened the final encrypted file hidden inside the Thari data logs. The file had been heavily corrupted, but enough remained to reveal one last piece of information. A transmission recorded shortly before the planetary systems began failing. An alien voice speaking in a language Lena's software quickly translated. The message was short, cold, and very clear. Operation complete. The Thari Collective will not interfere with Concord expansion routes. Planetary destabilization sequence confirmed. The command deck froze. Patel whispered the question no one wanted to ask. You're saying the Concord did this? Lena stared at the recording. 6 billion lives had been condemned to die. Not by nature, not by accident, but by the same galactic authority that had just refused to help them. General Hale spoke quietly. Record everything. His voice carried a dangerous calm. Every file. Every log. Every piece of evidence. Because the rescue mission had just become something else. The galaxy believed humanity had entered the Voidscar to save a dying civilization. But when the fleet left, they would carry proof of something far worse. The Concord had not simply abandoned the Thari. They had destroyed them. The rescue fleet remained in the Thari system for 9 days. 9 days of desperate work beneath a sky that seemed determined to tear itself apart. Shuttles moved constantly between the surface and orbit. Massive evacuation transports filled their cargo bays with terrified civilians. Medical ships treated thousands suffering from radiation sickness and atmospheric collapse. The situation on the planet worsened with every hour. Entire coastal cities had already vanished beneath violent tidal waves caused by shifting gravitational fields. Lightning storms burned across the skies without stopping. Huge cracks in the planet's crust released pillars of glowing plasma that could be seen even from orbit. Despite the chaos, the rescue operation succeeded. Millions of Thari civilians were evacuated. Then millions more. And more after that. But even with the entire fleet working non-stop, saving everyone was impossible. The Thari leadership understood that. Their final message to the fleet carried quiet dignity. Save as many as you can. Tell the galaxy we tried to survive. General Hale promised them he would. While the evacuation continued, Dr. Lena Ortiz and her team studied the sabotage evidence recovered from the Thari systems. The more data they analyzed, the clearer the truth became. The sabotage had not been random. The Thari system sat near the edge of a major hyperspace corridor connecting two prosperous regions of the galaxy. If the Thari civilization expanded further, their territory could interfere with Concord-controlled trade routes. The sabotage satellite had been planted years earlier. Waiting, monitoring, and when the time came, it had remotely accessed the Thari planetary core network. The destabilization sequence had been deliberate, calculated, an entire species erased for political convenience. The same Concord Council that had refused to help now stood revealed as the architects of the disaster. Lena finished compiling the final evidence file. She looked toward General Hale. This is enough. Hale nodded. Then we show it to the galaxy. When the evacuation fleet left the Voidscar, they carried more than refugees. They carried the truth. The journey back through the unstable sector was just as dangerous as the first passage. Radiation storms battered the ships. Navigation systems struggled against gravitational currents. 2 rescue vessels were damaged during the return trip, but the fleet survived. And when they finally emerged from the Voidscar, they did not head for Earth. Instead, the fleet changed course. Destination: Orionis Prime, the capital of the Galactic Concord. News of the human fleet's approach spread quickly across the galaxy. At first, the Concord believed the ships were returning to report the failure of the rescue mission. They expected a small fleet. Instead, they saw something unexpected. More than 100 human ships arriving in formation. Surrounding them were dozens of massive evacuation transports filled with Thari survivors. Millions of them. The fleet did not activate weapons. But it did not request permission to enter orbit either. The ships simply arrived. And waited. Inside the Grand Convocation Chamber, the same alien delegates gathered once again. This time the atmosphere felt different. Nervous. Uncertain. Because the humans had done something no one expected. They had entered the Voidscar. And they had come back. Ambassador Elena Marquez stood once more at the center of the chamber. The Volari representative addressed her carefully. You have returned. Yes. You ignored the Concord's recommendation against intervention. Yes. The chamber remained quiet. Finally, the Volari asked the question everyone wanted answered. Did your mission succeed? Marquez looked up toward the giant holographic screen above the chamber. Partially. She gestured to the control console. The screen filled with images from the evacuation fleet. Cities collapsing under violent storms. Human rescue ships lifting civilians from burning continents. Millions of Thari refugees boarding evacuation transports. Gasps echoed across the chamber. The Volari studied the footage. You saved them. Some of them. Marquez nodded slowly. But that's not why we came here. She pressed another command. The images changed. Now the screen displayed the sabotage satellite discovered above the Thari world. Encrypted transmissions. Engineering logs. The final message recorded by the Thari scientists. Operation complete. The Thari Collective will not interfere with Concord expansion routes. The chamber froze. Silence spread across hundreds of alien platforms. The Volari delegates stared at the recording. That is impossible. Marquez shook her head. No. She pointed toward the satellite's identification codes displayed on the screen. They belong to the Concord Intelligence Directorate. The chamber erupted with shocked signals. Delegates shouted questions. Others demanded verification. The Thaler Dominion representative leaned forward sharply. This evidence could be fabricated. Marquez responded calmly. Every file has been verified by multiple independent analysis teams. She gestured toward the refugees orbiting above the station. Millions of witnesses survived the sabotage. The chamber fell quiet again. For the first time in 10,000 years, the authority of the Galactic Concord was being challenged. Not by weapons, not by war, but by the truth. Marquez delivered the final words. The Concord refused to help the Thari. That was your choice. But someone within your government went further. They chose to destroy an entire civilization. She looked around the chamber. And now the galaxy deserves to know why. For several seconds after the recording ended, the Grand Convocation Chamber remained completely silent. Hundreds of civilizations stared at the holographic display hovering above the center of the hall. The sabotage logs. The encrypted Concord signal. The message that confirmed the unthinkable. An entire civilization had been deliberately destroyed. And the organization responsible for protecting the galaxy had allowed it to happen. Slowly, murmurs spread across the platforms. Delegates transmitted frantic messages to their home worlds. Some demanded immediate investigations. Others began reviewing Concord security protocols, trying to understand how such an operation could have occurred without public knowledge. But the truth was already spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Because the human fleet had done something very deliberate before arriving at Orionis Prime. They had broadcast the evidence, not just to the Concord Council, but to the entire galaxy. Every trade network, every communication hub, every public data archive. Within minutes, Billions of beings across hundreds of civilizations were watching the same recordings. The sabotage of the Thari home world. The Concord satellite hidden above the dying planet. The cold message confirming the operation. The revelation shook the galaxy. For 10,000 years the Concord had been seen as the guardian of stability. Now that image was cracking. Inside the chamber, the Valari delegates spoke again. Their voice no longer carried the calm authority it had earlier. This evidence will require full investigation. Ambassador Elena Marquez nodded. We agree. The Valari hesitated before continuing. The Concord did not authorize the destruction of the Thari Collective. Several other delegates quickly signaled agreement. If the Council had known about such an operation, the political consequences would have been enormous. Marquez spoke quietly. Then someone within the Concord acted without oversight. She looked up at the assembled representatives. And 6 billion people paid the price. The chamber grew quiet again. No one argued with that statement. The Thaler Dominion representative finally spoke. Their insectoid eyes glimmered under the chamber lights. What does humanity demand? The question echoed across the hall. Some delegates expected a request for compensation. Others feared something far worse. After all, humanity now possessed the sympathy of the galaxy. And their fleet had already proven capable of entering regions of space that others considered impossible. This could easily become the beginning of a war. But Marquez simply folded her hands. Humanity does not demand revenge. The statement surprised many delegates. She continued calmly. What we demand is accountability. The word carried enormous weight. Marquez gestured toward the screen again. The Concord was created to protect civilizations. To prevent exactly this kind of tragedy. She paused. But when power becomes secretive, when decisions are made without oversight, even good systems can become dangerous. The chamber listened carefully. Marquez finished her statement. The galaxy deserves a Concord that answers to its people. Not one that decides which civilizations live or die. The silence that followed felt different from before. Less defensive. More thoughtful. Many of the younger civilizations in the chamber had long questioned the absolute authority of the Concord's intelligence branches. Now they had proof those fears were justified. The Valari delegates slowly nodded. The Council will begin a full reform review. Investigations. Oversight committees. Transparency protocols. The political structure of the Concord was about to change. Not because of war, but because humanity had forced the galaxy to confront the truth. Above Oriones Prime, the human rescue fleet still drifted in orbit. Evacuation transports carried millions of Thari refugees. Medical ships continued treating the injured. Supply vessels prepared to escort the survivors to new worlds where they could rebuild their civilization. From the observation deck of the Horizon Dawn, Lena Ortiz watched the planet below. The stars reflected softly in the glass before her. For the first time since discovering the signal, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Footsteps approached behind her. General Hale joined her at the window. Looks like we made a difference, he said quietly. Lena nodded. Yeah. She looked out toward the fleet. Ships that had crossed one of the most dangerous regions of space simply because someone had asked for help. The rest of the galaxy had seen the risk. They had calculated the cost. And they had chosen to stay away. Humanity had looked at the same numbers. And reached a different conclusion. Not because they were stronger. Not because they were smarter. But because they believed something simple. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the safest choice. Sometimes it isn't the logical choice. Sometimes it's just the choice you make when someone out there needs help. Far beyond the station, the rescued Thari ships prepared for their journey to a new home. A civilization that would live on because one species in the galaxy had refused to look away. And across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings now understood something new about humanity. They were not the oldest civilization. They were not the most powerful. But when the galaxy needed someone to answer a call for help, humans were the ones who came.